Hey everyone, today I wanted to cover the endgame discussion regarding Monster Hunter Rise on the Nintendo Switch, and give something of a much clearer perspective as to how it actually breaks down and what you should be expecting going in. Since the reviews hit, there's been quite a bit of commotion and a rather unsettling narrative that's already been set. I'm not sure if it's natural or perhaps ill-intended, claiming that there doesn't seem to actually be any endgame format or even content, which is the furthest thing from the truth. So today I actually wanted to go over that and perhaps shed some clarity on the situation at hand. Do keep in mind that this is just covering the endgame and what it looks like at the time of launch. Further DLC and perhaps additions to the game will come further down the line, just like they did in Monster Hunter World, so nothing is definitive as of yet. Starting out, the main thing that you need to know is that the endgame farming, which is typically what people mean when they discuss the post-story content, or what will you be actually farming and what will you be getting out of it, in Monster Hunter Rise, comes in the form of weapons, specifically rampage weapon skills and charms. These are the two major driving factors for you to continually hunt after the credits actually roll. Obviously this varies from person to person, but knowing ahead of time is a welcome addition. That is to say, if you roll credits and you're actually satisfied with the experience, that is your endgame experience. But some people actually like to play after the credits roll, or definitely just want to hang out with friends online. So to them, the endgame experience is a little bit different than what yours might have been. Armor farming is not as important when it comes to Monster Hunter Rise, because for the most part, you'll have a rather easy time getting the armor sets you actually want. This is because armor sets, not just specifically one piece, but actually the whole set, require very little parts. You'll often see yourself getting decked out in a specific monster's gear in just a few runs. I think the days of farming just 1% plates are long gone. That's not to say there aren't some incentives to seek out farming monsters multiple times, but that's usually held for different parameters that I'll go over in a bit. The importance of decorations has also been greatly diminished. You craft each one of them based on the materials you gather like you would have in a typical hunt. Get some monster parts that are tied specifically to the decoration and have at it, basically all in the crafting menu. This makes decorations, just like armor, rather easy to come by as long as you're willing to invest the time to seek them out and hunt a specific monster for the rewards that you actually need. So far, what we know is that getting these armors and decorations doesn't really change in Rise, but is rather made simpler, but not by much. It's always a good thing to make people seek out hunting different monsters and try out different armor sets and different weapons. This is something that the developer team specifically spoke about in many different interviews. They wanted to give players an easy way to get armors and weapon upgrades needed so they can play around with different builds and test out different weapon types. The incentive to actually test out ideas and putting them in practice is much more important than actually maxing out one specific armor set. This is where the Rampage quests actually come in. Finishing Rampage hunts is basically the driving factor for most of the endgame farming at the time of launch, and there's little argument against it. And the reason for that is twofold. First, you have a simple concept of Defender tickets that are awarded to you when you finish a Rampage quest. These are pretty much used for getting weapon upgrades and giving your specific weapon some new skills. These are permanent buffs that are attached to the weapon, and they are there to stay. They come in many forms, but they basically are tied to the weapon type and not just one specific weapon you have available. So think of them like passive damage or affinity boost, but any sort of variety that gives your permanent damage boost, but not like your armor sets or your armor skills that will have triggering effects if certain things are met, specifically different qualifiers. All of the melee weapons have 3 slots that can be upgraded with Rampage skills, making good use of your tickets, but bowguns specifically have 5 different slots. The reason for that is that shot types are also available for gunners to boost directly, so you can choose to boost a specific shot type indirectly from the rest of your shots and give your bowgun a specific modifier to target specific monsters in each different hunt. This is where having a variety of weapons comes into play. That also lets you have a different shot types and even elemental affinities tied to each different bowgun that you actually have available. Keep in mind that Rampage skills are mostly directly tied to Rampage hunts. These are not buffs that you'll be chasing after if you're just looking for traditional quests or chasing a specific monster. But it's also worth mentioning that during a specific Rampage hunt, you will be able to get monster parts as well. This helps you perhaps craft even more armor and get the aforementioned decorations a bit easier. everything almost feeds into Rampage Quest to begin with, and this is why they seem to be, for now, the driving factor of the endgame experience. One last thing to note is that while you can't specifically choose which monsters appear in the Rampage Quest that you're currently undertaking, you will be able to seek out which Apex monster actually appears, so you do have some controls in that regard. Otherwise, it's basically a toss-up. Charms is the real big get when it comes to endgame farming and the typical endgame experience you've grown accustomed to in Monster Hunter games. Essentially, nothing in the games actually gives you charms. You can't mine them, monsters won't drop them, and even Rampage rewards won't provide you with a single charm. Each charm you obtain is melded from 5 different types, and each of these types have a skill type that you can certainly aim to try to get, but it's not quite clear just yet if you can always get those same specific rewards. Melding requires a list of assorted materials that you'll simply get by farming monsters or doing Rampage Quest. Nothing specifically tied to either one, and of course, some village points for addition. However, one of the charm types does require other talismans, which is also interesting. The point is that based on the level of charm you actually obtain, skills are tied to the potential of a higher number of skills you could have been tied to that specific charm. From what we know so far, only 2 skills can be attached to any one charm, and only the first skill can be capped, while the second one could fluctuate wildly on not just what it could have, but the total number of bonuses tied to it. Then there's also the slots that can be capped out at 3 in total. All in all, charms are basically the min-max format of getting the perfect armor loadout for the endgame experience and the key driver of what you will be aiming for to obtain in Monster Hunter Rise. In past games, this was getting god charms or even the perfect decoration. This time around, getting that specific charm with the skills that you actually want is left to melding, which is, as we know, could be RNG related. As of the time of this recording, I'm not aware of any specific save trick to know what could be the next charm based on the potential queue like you could in Monster Hunter World, so forgive me for that because as of right now I don't think we know that information. All of this ties back to how armor sets feel a bit easier to obtain, and trying charms to RNG endgame hunts and Rampage is clearly a new way to handle the loop experience that hunters will get into once they finish the game and basically roll credits. The beauty is that by design, most of these things don't come into play when you're simply playing the game naturally before you even reach the potential endgame or even roll credits. The game feels extremely accessible otherwise and doesn't hit you over the head like in previous Monster Hunter titles with a difficulty skill check, which I know for a fact was the biggest detractor to some players. For the most part, while being a bit more technical with the use of the wire bugs and palamutes, and even making perfect use of the endemic life, the game is much more approachable than what you would have actually expected going in. And of course, that Magna Malo demo quest was just a test bed to see who could actually clear it. But the game doesn't feel that much difficult until the much later encounters, and even by that point, you do have some rather interesting armor sets and combinations to test out to even cheese some of the encounters if you so wish. I have seen some people criticize the fact that the actual game's last boss is not part of the game as of right now. This is actually a fair criticism and an accurate one at that, since it'll be added as a part of the future DLC patch according to Capcom. But due to the continual rise of games as a service, this shouldn't come to much of a surprise to me or to anyone for that matter. We know that Capcom has said that the level cap will also be unlocked in April. This is another driving factor that people will certainly push for in endgame when it comes to getting all that popular 999 HR. With all of this said, I wouldn't necessarily go worrying about some of the shortcomings as of right now. We've become rather accustomed to 500-hour experiences in Monster Hunter titles, and this game will give us that and much more. But with the understanding that Capcom now knows how to gradually add more and more content and much more tougher encounters as we progress into the future of a potential G-Rank update with a slew of new monsters coming into play. This doesn't even touch on any of the discussion when it comes to now having the option to tackle village and online rank quests separately, adding a much more robust experience if you wish to tackle it solo or play with friends online. Hopefully this video helped you guys understand what we're dealing with when it comes to the endgame experience in Monster Hunter Rise at the time of launch. I've seen plenty of nasty criticisms and some outright silly ones like World had more endgame than Monster Hunter Rise, which is flat out false to begin with. But since people are still hung up on that exclusivity and console warring, it shouldn't come to anyone's surprise. Just don't let any of that kill your enjoyment of the game and have fun out there. If you're new to my channel, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya!